A man is swallowed by a gigantic snake, disappears into the darkness of its impossible body, and then, in one of the strangest moments ever committed to a major Hollywood creature feature, he returns by being violently regurgitated back into the world. Covered in slime, barely human, and somehow still alive, Paul Sarwan looks directly at the camera and delivers one final, unforgettable wink. It is a moment that should not work. It is too ridiculous. Too exaggerated. Too completely disconnected from the rules of reality. And yet, somehow, it perfectly captures why Anaconda has survived long after its original release. Because beneath the oversized snake, the outrageous action, and the unbelievable performances is a movie that understood something many films spend years trying to learn. Sometimes audiences do not want perfection. Sometimes they want spectacle, personality, and a wild ride they will never forget. Released in 1997, Anaconda arrived during a fascinating era of Hollywood filmmaking. The industry was fascinated by the possibilities of computer-generated creatures, larger-than-life adventures, and movies that could turn a simple concept into a worldwide event. The premise was almost impossible to ignore: a group of filmmakers traveling deep into the Amazon rainforest, only to encounter a massive predator unlike anything they had ever seen. On paper, it sounded like a straightforward monster movie. But the strange magic of Anaconda came from how seriously it presented something completely absurd. The film walked a delicate line between horror, adventure, and pure camp. It created tension while also embracing the ridiculousness of its own existence. Critics at the time were not impressed. Many dismissed the movie as silly, predictable, and technically uneven. The effects were questioned, the dialogue was mocked, and the story was considered too simple. But audiences reacted differently. Despite the negative reviews, Anaconda became a major box office success, proving that a movie did not always need critical approval to become part of popular culture. And a huge reason for that was Paul Sarwan. Played by Jon Voight, Sarwan is not just a villain. He is an event. Every scene transforms the movie into something more chaotic, more unpredictable, and far more entertaining. His exaggerated accent, intense expressions, and almost theatrical approach to danger created one of the most memorable B-movie antagonists of the 1990s. Voight does not simply play Sarwan as a dangerous man. He plays him like someone who believes he belongs in a completely different movie, one filled with mystery, obsession, and impossible adventures. His performance is so committed that it becomes impossible to look away. The accent may be one of the most debated parts of the film, but it also became one of the reasons people remembered him. Sarwan was not realistic. He was unforgettable. What made Anaconda even more surprising was the level of talent surrounding this ridiculous premise. At the center of the movie were recognizable stars who represented a new generation of Hollywood entertainment. Jennifer Lopez, Ice Cube, and Owen Wilson were not unknown performers thrown into a cheap monster film. They were major names placed directly in front of a creature that pushed the limits of 1990s visual effects. Seeing these actors run, fight, and struggle against a gigantic digital snake created a strange contrast. The movie combined the glamour of mainstream Hollywood with the outrageous imagination of a creature feature that belonged in a midnight theater. It was a collision between prestige and pulp, between movie star appeal and old-fashioned monster movie chaos. That contradiction is exactly what makes Anaconda fascinating decades later. It was never trying to become a perfectly polished thriller. It was creating an experience built around fear, excitement, humor, and unforgettable moments. The film understood that a giant snake attacking famous actors in the middle of the jungle was an inherently wild idea, and instead of hiding from that absurdity, it embraced it. The result was a movie that critics struggled to take seriously, but audiences continued to remember. A film where logic often takes a back seat, but personality drives the entire journey. And sometimes, that is exactly what turns a simple creature feature into a lasting piece of cinematic chaos. Behind the unforgettable chaos of Anaconda lies a production story almost as unpredictable as the creature itself. A film set in the depths of the Amazon rainforest was never going to be a simple Hollywood adventure. The cast and crew were not only battling the challenges of creating a jungle environment on screen, but also the unpredictable reality of working in harsh natural conditions. Heat, difficult locations, and the physical demands of filming created an atmosphere where every scene carried its own challenges. But the biggest challenge was the one that had to feel alive. The giant snake at the center of the story needed to be terrifying, powerful, and believable enough to carry an entire movie. Creating that creature required a combination of practical effects, mechanical engineering, and early digital technology. The animatronic snake designed for the production was an enormous achievement for its time. But like many ambitious movie effects, it came with its own problems. A creature built from machines, cables, and complex systems could look incredible one moment and become impossible to control the next. Those behind-the-scenes struggles reveal something important about Anaconda. This was a movie caught between two worlds. It had the budget, recognizable stars, and marketing power of a major Hollywood release, but its heart belonged to the tradition of low-budget exploitation cinema, the kind of filmmaking built around one irresistible idea taken to the extreme. A giant snake hunting people in the jungle is not a complicated concept. It is a concept that depends on execution, atmosphere, and commitment. Anaconda became interesting because it treated a simple monster movie idea with the resources of a studio blockbuster. The result was a strange combination of expensive filmmaking and B-movie energy. Throughout this deep dive, we will explore why that unusual mixture worked. The journey will examine how the film creates tension through its visual choices, how the performances pushed the story into unexpected territory, and how characters like Paul Sarwan represent a larger tradition of unforgettable cinematic villains who are impossible to ignore. We will look beyond the surface-level jokes and examine the filmmaking decisions that shaped the experience. From the way the jungle is presented as a character itself, to the use of music and sound design to build suspense, every element contributes to the strange identity of the movie. The film's score, editing choices, creature design, and visual effects will reveal how Anaconda creates moments of genuine excitement even when the story embraces complete absurdity. The contrast between fear and humor, realism and exaggeration, ambition and chaos, becomes the foundation of its unique personality. And by looking back at its box office performance and long-term cultural impact, we can understand why a movie once dismissed by critics became a recognizable piece of 1990s pop culture. Anaconda was never simply about a snake. It was about the power of an unforgettable concept, the risks of ambitious filmmaking, and the strange magic that happens when Hollywood takes something completely outrageous and gives it everything it has. For many viewers, Anaconda is not remembered as just a movie. It is remembered as a moment in time. A time when walking through a video rental store felt like discovering an entire world of possibilities. Before streaming platforms placed thousands of movies instantly at our fingertips, choosing a film meant standing in front of shelves filled with colorful VHS covers, studying the artwork, and deciding which impossible adventure was worth taking home for the weekend. The late 1990s were a golden period for that kind of cinematic discovery. Movies did not need to become timeless masterpieces to become unforgettable. They simply needed the right combination of a memorable concept, a striking poster, and enough excitement to make someone press play. Creature features especially thrived in this environment because they promised something simple and powerful: a monster, a threat, and ordinary people trying to survive something extraordinary. For countless viewers, Anaconda became part of that experience through repeated television broadcasts and cable reruns. Channels like TNT and TBS turned movies like this into familiar weekend companions, replaying action adventures, thrillers, and creature features so often that they became connected to specific memories. A rainy afternoon at home, a late-night channel search, or a lazy weekend with nothing planned could suddenly turn into a journey deep into the jungle. There was something uniquely comforting about those repeated viewings. Even when audiences knew exactly when the snake would appear or how certain scenes would unfold, the excitement remained. The movie became less about surprise and more about the feeling it created, the strange combination of fear, curiosity, and entertainment that made people keep watching. And for a generation growing up during that era, giant creatures created a special kind of childhood fascination. Dinosaurs, sharks, aliens, and jungle monsters dominated screens, but there was something different about a giant snake. Unlike many fantasy creatures, snakes already existed in the real world. They represented something familiar but amplified into a nightmare. The fear came from the possibility. A child watching Anaconda could look at the jungle and imagine what might be hidden beyond the trees. Every shadow, every movement in the water, and every sound in the darkness carried the possibility of something enormous waiting nearby. The movie transformed a natural animal into a mythological threat, creating the kind of memorable fear that stays with viewers long after the credits. This was the era when Hollywood fully embraced the creature feature comeback. Studios understood that audiences loved simple, high-concept ideas. A massive snake. A deadly storm. A prehistoric predator. A creature that should not exist but somehow does. These films were built around immediate emotional reactions, and Anaconda became one of the defining examples of that approach. For younger audiences discovering it today, the movie represents a fascinating time when blockbuster entertainment was less polished but often more experimental. Before every effect was expected to look flawless, filmmakers could create excitement through imagination, practical craftsmanship, and sheer confidence. That is why Anaconda continues to attract new viewers decades later. It represents a filmmaking era where movies were allowed to be strange, excessive, and completely committed to their own ridiculous ideas. It was not just a giant snake movie. It was a piece of the 1990s creature feature explosion, a reminder of when Hollywood chased bigger monsters, louder adventures, and unforgettable moments that could turn an ordinary weekend into a cinematic memory. In the years following the release of Jurassic Park, Hollywood entered a new era of creature filmmaking. Audiences had witnessed dinosaurs brought back to life with a level of realism that changed expectations forever. The success of Steven Spielberg's blockbuster proved that audiences were still fascinated by monsters, but it also created a new challenge for filmmakers. How could another creature movie stand out when computer-generated imagery had suddenly raised the standard for what was possible? The answer from Columbia Pictures was not to chase dinosaurs, but to return to a different kind of fear. A creature that did not need to be ancient. A creature that already existed in the human imagination as something mysterious and dangerous. A creature that could hide beneath the water, disappear into the jungle, and strike without warning. That creature was the snake. Anaconda was developed as a large-scale studio monster movie built around a simple but powerful concept. A documentary crew traveling into the Amazon rainforest becomes trapped in a deadly battle against a gigantic predator. The idea was rooted in the tradition of classic creature features, where the central attraction was not complicated mythology or endless explanations, but the emotional thrill of confronting something impossible. Columbia Pictures reportedly invested around $45 million into the project, a significant amount for a film based on such a straightforward premise. The challenge was finding the balance between a traditional B-movie idea and the expectations of a modern theatrical release. The studio wanted the excitement of old-school monster movies, but with the scale, production value, and recognizable talent associated with major Hollywood entertainment. This approach shaped every major decision behind the film. Director Luis Loza was chosen to bring the project to life. Coming from a background that included action-oriented filmmaking, Loza understood the importance of pacing, physical danger, and visual spectacle. Anaconda required a filmmaker who could make the audience believe in the threat while also maintaining the adventurous energy of a jungle survival story. The film's concept depended heavily on atmosphere. The Amazon rainforest could not simply be a background. It needed to feel endless, unpredictable, and almost alive. The jungle represented isolation, a place where modern technology and human confidence could quickly become meaningless. The deeper the characters traveled, the more the environment itself became part of the danger. To achieve that feeling, production explored real jungle locations in South America, including areas of Peru and Brazil. Filming in such environments offered authenticity that could not easily be recreated, but it also introduced enormous logistical challenges. Working in dense rainforest conditions meant dealing with unpredictable weather, difficult terrain, and the practical limitations of moving a large film crew through remote areas. Because the production required greater control for certain scenes, additional jungle environments were also created in controlled locations, including sets in Arcadia, California. These constructed environments allowed the filmmakers to manage lighting, camera movement, and complex creature sequences more effectively. The combination of real locations and artificial sets reflected the film's larger identity, part adventure movie, part studio spectacle, and part traditional monster film. One of the biggest investments was the snake itself. At a time when digital effects were rapidly expanding, Anaconda chose to rely heavily on practical creature effects. The production needed a giant snake that could interact physically with actors and the environment. The challenge was not simply creating a large animal, but creating one with enough movement and personality to feel like a living threat. Building that creature required extensive mechanical design. A massive animatronic snake had to be engineered with systems capable of controlling its movement, weight, and interaction with the cast. Every appearance of the creature required careful planning because the filmmakers were working with a physical object rather than something that could simply be created later inside a computer. This created a fascinating contrast within the film's budget. Money had to be carefully divided between the recognizable stars who would carry the movie's commercial appeal and the complicated effects work needed to sell its central attraction. The casting reflected the studio's desire to make Anaconda feel bigger than a typical monster movie. featuring actors such as Jennifer Lopez, Ice Cube, and Owen Wilson, gave the project a level of visibility that many creature features never received. Their presence helped transform the film from a simple jungle horror story into a mainstream Hollywood event. But the decision also created an unusual combination. The movie had the ingredients of a summer blockbuster: famous performers, a large budget, international locations, and ambitious effects, while still following the basic formula of exploitation cinema. The entire film was built around one outrageous idea and the willingness to take that idea as far as possible. That tension became the foundation of Anaconda's identity. It was a movie created during a period when Hollywood was searching for the next great cinematic creature after Jurassic Park changed the industry. Instead of competing with dinosaurs through realism, Anaconda embraced exaggeration. Instead of pretending its concept was ordinary, it made the concept the entire reason for its existence. The result was a production that represented a fascinating moment in Hollywood history, when studios were willing to spend blockbuster money on a story that belonged to the wild, unpredictable tradition of creature features. A film where ambition, technology, star power, and old-fashioned monster movie instincts collided deep inside the jungle. By the time Anaconda approached its theatrical release in April 1997, Hollywood was experiencing a strange moment of transition. The creature feature was no longer the forgotten genre it had become during much of the 1980s and early 1990s. Audiences had once again proven that they were willing to show up for movies built around impossible threats, massive creatures, and survival against overwhelming odds. Much of that renewed interest came from the enormous impact of Jurassic Park. Steven Spielberg's dinosaur epic had not only become a worldwide phenomenon, it had also changed the way studios viewed visual effects. The film demonstrated that audiences would accept creatures beyond imagination if filmmakers could make them feel real. Suddenly, every studio was searching for its own version of that success. The industry entered a rush to find the next great creature-driven blockbuster. Executives looked for concepts that could be explained in a single sentence: a dangerous animal, a terrifying environment, and ordinary people forced into extraordinary circumstances. The formula was familiar because it connected back to the tradition of movies like Jaws, where the fear came from a simple idea transformed into a cultural event. After Jaws proved that a single predator could dominate the box office, Hollywood spent years searching for new versions of that same primal fear. The difference was that the threats were expanding. The ocean was no longer the only place hiding monsters. The land, the sky, and even the jungle became potential battlefields. Anaconda arrived directly in the middle of that movement. But the timing also created pressure. Audiences had become more demanding because digital effects were advancing rapidly. A giant snake movie could no longer rely only on imagination and suspense. Viewers had seen dinosaurs running, fighting, and interacting with humans in ways that felt revolutionary. Any new creature feature had to answer an important question: could its monster compete with what audiences had already witnessed? That expectation created both excitement and skepticism around Anaconda. Some viewers were fascinated by the idea of a gigantic snake brought to life with modern filmmaking techniques. Others questioned whether a story built around one enormous reptile could truly justify a major studio budget. The film's greatest advantage was its unusual cast. At the center was Jennifer Lopez, who was becoming one of Hollywood's most recognizable rising stars. Following the success and attention surrounding Selena, Lopez represented a new generation of performers crossing between music, television, and film. Her involvement gave Anaconda additional mainstream appeal beyond the traditional audience for monster movies. Then there was Ice Cube, already established as one of the most influential figures in hip-hop before expanding his career into acting. His presence added a different kind of energy to the film. He brought a level of cultural recognition that helped connect Anaconda with younger audiences who may not have been immediately interested in a jungle creature thriller. Opposite them was Jon Voight, an Academy Award-winning veteran performer whose career represented a completely different generation of Hollywood. His casting created an unusual dynamic, a respected dramatic actor stepping into the world of exaggerated adventure cinema. This mixture of personalities was one of the film's most interesting qualities before audiences even saw it. Anaconda was not built around one specific type of star. It combined emerging celebrity power, music culture influence, and traditional Hollywood prestige. The cast itself reflected the changing entertainment landscape of the late 1990s. The marketing campaign leaned heavily into the film's central promise: survival against something enormous. Promotional materials focused on the danger of the jungle, the terror of the snake, and the spectacle of seeing famous actors trapped in a fight for their lives. The studio understood that the concept did not require complicated explanation. The hook was immediate. A crew enters the Amazon. Something massive is hunting them. Escape becomes impossible. The advertising emphasized the physical nature of the experience. The film was presented as a visceral adventure filled with practical effects, intense moments, and a creature large enough to dominate the screen. The marketing did not attempt to hide the simplicity of the premise. Instead, it turned that simplicity into the main attraction. In many ways, Anaconda represented the final stretch of a certain kind of 1990s blockbuster thinking. It was a film built around a high-concept idea, recognizable faces, and the promise of a memorable theatrical experience. It arrived at a time when studios were caught between two approaches: the practical craftsmanship of traditional monster movies and the digital revolution reshaping Hollywood. That uncertainty became part of the movie's identity. Anaconda was released into a world expecting the next Jurassic Park, but it offered something different. It was not trying to redefine visual effects. It was trying to deliver the classic thrill of watching humans face something much bigger than themselves. And whether audiences viewed that as a strength or a weakness would become the defining question surrounding the film's arrival. Before Anaconda becomes a battle between humans and a creature of impossible size, the film begins by creating a very different kind of fear. The Amazon is introduced not as an active threat, but as a place of mystery, a vast environment where humanity's confidence begins to disappear one step at a time. The story opens with the feeling of a traditional adventure. A documentary crew travels deep into the Amazon rainforest searching for the elusive Shirashama tribe, a group believed to exist far away from the reach of modern civilization. Their mission is built around discovery. They are not hunters searching for a monster. They are filmmakers searching for a story. That distinction matters because the crew represents a familiar cinematic idea: outsiders entering a world they do not fully understand. They arrive with cameras, equipment, and ambition, believing that technology and preparation will protect them from whatever they encounter. But the jungle does not recognize their plans. It does not care about their schedules, their careers, or their expectations. The film immediately establishes this danger through a disturbing opening sequence involving a poacher confrontation on a riverboat. Before the audience fully understands what is happening, the movie reveals that something powerful is already moving beneath the surface of the Amazon. The encounter introduces the snake not as a simple animal, but as an almost unstoppable force of nature. The scene works because it creates fear through uncertainty. The audience does not need to see everything clearly. The suggestion of danger becomes more effective than a full explanation. The river, the darkness, and the isolation combine to create the feeling that something ancient and unpredictable exists beyond human control. This opening moment prepares viewers for the world the documentary crew is about to enter. The Amazon is beautiful, but it is also unforgiving. Every quiet stretch of water could hide a threat. Every movement in the trees could mean something is watching. When the film shifts focus to the documentary team, it introduces a group of characters whose personalities create the foundation for the journey ahead. Terry Flores, played by Jennifer Lopez, serves as the crew's director and emotional center. She is determined, intelligent, and focused on completing the documentary. Her role places her between creative ambition and practical responsibility. She wants to capture something meaningful, but the deeper the crew travels, the more she must confront the limits of planning and control. Danny Rich, portrayed by Ice Cube, brings a different energy to the group. As the production's cameraman, he represents the person behind the lens, the individual responsible for documenting the journey while still being trapped inside it. His presence adds a grounded perspective to the team, especially as the adventure begins moving further away from the world they know. Dr. Stephen Cale, played by Eric Stoltz, represents the intellectual side of the expedition. His knowledge and expertise suggest that the crew is not simply chasing an adventure story but attempting something with scientific and cultural value. However, his character also reflects the danger of relying too heavily on knowledge in an environment where survival requires more than information. Then there is Gary, played by Owen Wilson, whose personality adds another layer to the group dynamic. He represents the younger, more inexperienced side of the expedition, someone caught between excitement and uncertainty. His presence helps reinforce that this journey is not filled with professional explorers, but ordinary people who believe they understand the risks ahead. The crew travels aboard the riverboat Miri, a vessel that quickly becomes one of the film's most important spaces. Surrounded by endless jungle and narrow waterways, the boat creates a sense of isolation. It is not just transportation. It becomes a floating boundary between civilization and the unknown. The physical limitations of the Miri also contribute to the film's tension. The crew may be moving forward, but they are trapped within a confined space. The jungle surrounds them from every direction, creating a feeling that escape is always limited. The river offers a path, but it also carries them deeper into danger. At first, however, the journey carries a sense of excitement. The atmosphere is calm. The crew members are focused on their mission. The rainforest appears mysterious rather than threatening. There is still a belief that this expedition will become a career-defining achievement rather than a fight for survival. That illusion begins to change when they encounter a mysterious river traveler, Paul Sarwan. Arriving seemingly out of nowhere, Sarwan immediately changes the energy of the expedition. He is not presented like a normal guide or a helpful stranger. There is something unsettling about him, a confidence that suggests he knows more about the jungle than he reveals. His arrival introduces the first major disruption to the crew's controlled world. Until this moment, they believed they were leading their own journey. With Sarwan aboard the Miri, that control begins to shift. The peaceful beginning of the expedition slowly gives way to something far more dangerous. The crew entered the Amazon searching for a hidden civilization, but they are about to discover something else entirely, a force that will challenge everything they thought they understood about survival. The arrival of Paul Sarwan changes the direction of the expedition before anyone fully understands what is happening. At first, his presence appears to be a fortunate accident. The crew discovers him stranded on the river, separated from his own vessel and seemingly in need of help. In the unforgiving environment of the Amazon, where isolation can quickly become deadly, rescuing another person feels like the obvious choice. But Anaconda immediately begins playing with a familiar adventure movie idea. The stranger who appears to offer guidance may actually be leading everyone towards something far more dangerous. Sarwan presents himself as someone who understands the jungle better than anyone else aboard the Miri. He speaks with confidence, moves with the certainty of an experienced traveler, and carries the kind of personality that naturally attracts attention. To the documentary crew, he represents exactly what they believe they need, someone capable of helping them reach the Shirashama tribe and navigate an environment they barely understand. His authority does not come from official leadership. It comes from performance. Sarwan knows how to appear useful. He understands that confidence can be more persuasive than facts, especially when people are surrounded by uncertainty. The crew members are filmmakers, researchers, and adventurers, but they are still outsiders in this environment. They have cameras and equipment, but Sarwan has experience and instinct. That difference allows him to slowly position himself as the person everyone should trust. The danger is that Sarwan's knowledge is real. He does understand the jungle. He does know the river. He is not pretending to be capable. His deception comes from hiding why he is truly there. The mission to find the Shirashama tribe becomes a convenient excuse. Behind the promise of helping the documentary crew lies a different obsession, the search for a legendary giant anaconda that Sarwan believes exists somewhere deep within the rainforest. This obsession reveals the first major contrast between Sarwan and the rest of the expedition. The documentary crew is searching for discovery. They want to observe, record, and share a story with the world. Sarwan is searching for conquest. He does not want to understand the creature. He wants to capture it. For him, the jungle is not a place of mystery or respect. It is a challenge waiting to be defeated. That difference creates the true conflict at the heart of the journey. The snake itself may be the physical threat, but Sarwan represents another kind of danger, human ambition without limits. His desire to prove himself becomes more powerful than his concern for anyone around him. The crew does not immediately recognize this because they are distracted by their own goals. They are focused on reaching their destination and completing their documentary. Their optimism makes them vulnerable. They believe they are still in control of their expedition, unaware that Sarwan has already begun changing its direction. The turning point arrives when Dr. Stephen Cale suffers a near-fatal accident caused by a wasp sting. The incident is sudden and brutal, transforming the atmosphere of the journey instantly. Cale, who represents knowledge, preparation, and rational thinking within the group, becomes physically unable to guide the expedition. The emergency tracheotomy that follows is one of the film's most important moments because it removes the crew's strongest voice of reason. Until this point, Cale's intelligence and caution provided balance against the uncertainty surrounding the jungle. With him incapacitated, the group loses the person most capable of challenging Sarwan's influence. The situation creates a leadership vacuum, and Sarwan is ready to fill it. This is where his manipulation becomes more obvious. He does not need to openly take control. Instead, he uses the crew's desperation and fear to make his decisions appear necessary. In a dangerous environment, the person who seems most confident often becomes the person others follow. The Miri, once a symbol of the crew's own mission, slowly becomes an extension of Saron's obsession. The journey begins moving away from the planned route toward unexplored areas where Sarwan believes his prize is waiting. The change is subtle, which makes it more unsettling. There is no dramatic announcement that the expedition has been hijacked. No single moment where everyone realizes they are in danger. Instead, the crew gradually finds themselves further from safety and deeper into Saron's world. The river becomes narrower. The surroundings become more isolated. The distance from civilization grows with every mile. And beneath all of it is the realization that the expedition was never simply traveling toward the Shirashama tribe. They were being guided towards something else, something Sarwan has spent years chasing. A creature that represents the ultimate test of his ambition. A creature that does not care about reputation, fame, or obsession. A creature that cannot be controlled. Once Paul Sarwan takes control of the Miri, the expedition begins to transform from a scientific journey into a survival mission. The change does not happen all at once. There is no immediate declaration that the crew has been betrayed or that their mission has become something else entirely. Instead, the atmosphere slowly shifts. Conversations become more tense. Decisions become more dangerous. The people aboard the boat begin to realize that the person guiding them through the jungle may be the greatest threat they face. Saron's leadership is built on intimidation and certainty. He does not lead through trust or cooperation. He leads by creating the impression that he is the only person capable of keeping everyone alive. In an environment where every mistake could have deadly consequences, that confidence becomes powerful. Fear makes people willing to follow someone who appears to have answers. But Saron's answers are shaped by obsession. The Miri is no longer moving toward the documentary crew's original goal. Every decision is now influenced by Saron's desire to find the legendary Anaconda. The jungle is no longer a location for exploration. It becomes a hunting ground, and the crew members are slowly being transformed from filmmakers into unwilling participants in Saron's personal quest. The first major sign that they are dealing with something beyond ordinary danger comes during the attack on Mateo. Until this point, the crew has experienced the unpredictability of the jungle, but they have not fully understood the scale of the threat surrounding them. The danger has been suggested through atmosphere and warning signs, but the creature itself has remained hidden. That changes when the snake strikes. The night attack creates one of the film's most effective moments of tension because it uses darkness and uncertainty to its advantage. The crew is vulnerable because they cannot see what is approaching. The jungle, which already feels endless during the day, becomes even more threatening after sunset. Every sound carries the possibility of danger, and every shadow hides something unknown. Mateo's encounter with the snake marks a turning point. The crew is no longer dealing with rumors, legends, or Saron's obsession. They are facing a real predator. Something enormous is moving around them, watching them, and choosing when to attack. The psychological impact is immediate. Before this moment, some members of the group could still believe that Sarwan was exaggerating or that the dangers of the jungle were being overstated. The attack destroys that confidence. The expedition is no longer an adventure that has gone slightly wrong. It has become a situation where survival is uncertain. The loss of safety affects everyone differently. Some respond with fear. Others respond with denial. But the one thing they all share is the realization that their original plans no longer matter. The documentary they came to create is becoming impossible because simply staying alive has become the priority. Sarwan, however, does not see the snake as a threat. He sees an opportunity. While the rest of the crew begins questioning whether they can survive, Sarwan becomes more determined. The creature that terrifies everyone else represents the achievement he has been searching for. This is what separates him from the others. A normal person would see the anaconda as something to escape. Sarwan sees it as something that could make him legendary. His obsession also affects Gary. Played by Owen Wilson, Gary represents one of the crew members most vulnerable to Saron's influence. Unlike Terry or Danny, who quickly begin recognizing the danger of Saron's control, Gary is more easily attracted to the possibilities Sarwan presents. The promise of wealth and discovery appeals to his imagination. Sarwan understands exactly how to manipulate that desire. He does not simply command Gary to follow him. He offers him a fantasy. He suggests that capturing the giant snake could bring fame, money, and a life-changing reward. It is a classic manipulation tactic. Sarwan turns greed and ambition into tools, convincing Gary that he is not being used, he is being offered an opportunity. But as the situation grows more dangerous, that illusion begins to collapse. The creature is not a treasure waiting to be claimed. It is a force of nature that cannot be negotiated with or controlled. As Saron's influence expands, Terry and Danny become increasingly aware that surviving the snake is only one part of their problem. They also have to survive the person who brought them into this situation. Their relationship becomes one of the film's most important emotional anchors. Terry brings determination and leadership, while Danny provides skepticism and a practical understanding of the reality around them. Together, they begin challenging Saron's authority and searching for ways to regain control of the Miri. Their alliance is not built on heroism or grand speeches. It develops because they recognize the same truth: the crew cannot survive if they continue following Sarwan blindly. The conflict aboard the boat becomes just as important as the danger outside it. The snake represents a physical threat, but Sarwan represents the danger created by human obsession. One hunts because it is following instinct. The other hunts because he chooses to ignore every warning sign. By this point, the expedition has changed completely. The crew entered the Amazon searching for a story about discovery. Instead, they have become part of a story about survival. And somewhere in the darkness surrounding the Miri, the creature Sarwan has been chasing continues to move closer. The growing tension aboard the Miri eventually reaches a point where the crew can no longer tolerate Saron's control. For much of the journey, they have been trapped between two dangers: the creature stalking them through the jungle and the man who has deliberately guided them into its path. But as the losses continue and the truth about Saron's intentions becomes impossible to ignore, the crew finally decides they must take back control. The attempt to restrain Sarwan represents more than a physical rebellion. It is the moment when the survivors begin rejecting the illusion that he is their protector. The confidence and authority he displayed earlier are revealed for what they truly were: manipulation disguised as leadership. By binding Sarwan, the crew believes they have removed the human threat standing between them and survival. For a brief moment, it appears that they may finally have control over their own fate. Without Sarwan making decisions based on obsession, they can return to the original mission or at least find a safer path through the jungle. But the Amazon does not allow simple solutions. Their greatest challenge arrives in the form of a massive river obstruction blocking their path. The obstacle turns the Miri from a vehicle of exploration into a trapped space surrounded by danger. The river, which once represented movement and possibility, becomes another barrier preventing escape. The crew is forced into a desperate decision. To continue forward, they must clear the blockage using explosives. It is a practical solution under impossible circumstances, but it also highlights how far they have fallen from their original expedition. They are no longer documenting the unknown. They are fighting against it. The sequence involving Gary and the dynamite becomes one of the film's most tragic examples of how quickly the group's situation has deteriorated. Earlier, Gary was one of the characters most influenced by Saron's promises. He was attracted to the idea of discovery, reward, and adventure. He wanted to believe that the danger surrounding them could lead to something valuable. But the jungle offers no rewards for ambition. The attempt to clear the river obstacle ends in disaster, showing that even human solutions have become unreliable. The environment itself has become an enemy. Every decision carries consequences, and every attempt to move forward creates another opportunity for tragedy. Gary's death also reinforces one of the film's central themes: the danger of underestimating forces beyond human control. The crew entered the Amazon believing they could observe it, navigate it, and eventually leave it behind. But the deeper they travel, the more the jungle strips away that confidence. At the same time, Sarwan proves that even when physically restrained, he remains a dangerous presence. The chaos surrounding the river blockage creates the opportunity he needs to escape. His return to power reveals something important about his character. Sarwan does not simply survive because he is lucky. He survives because he is constantly adapting, manipulating, and exploiting weakness. His escape creates a disturbing realization for the remaining crew members. They believed the snake was the greatest threat they faced, but Sarwan continues proving that human obsession can be just as destructive as any predator. The difference between Sarwan and the Anaconda becomes increasingly clear. The snake attacks because it follows instinct. It does not hate, plan, or seek recognition. Sarwan, however, chooses his actions. His danger comes from intelligence without empathy. He is willing to sacrifice people because he believes his goal justifies everything. As the crew loses members and control of the situation, their resources begin disappearing as well. Equipment is damaged. Their plans collapse. The journey that began with professional confidence and carefully prepared objectives has been reduced to a struggle for basic survival. This transformation is one of the film's most effective shifts. Anaconda begins as an adventure story about exploration, but it gradually removes every element that makes adventure feel exciting. The comfortable distance between observer and danger disappears. The crew is no longer studying the rainforest. They are trapped inside its violence. The Miri itself becomes a symbol of this collapse. Once a place filled with equipment, purpose, and possibility, it becomes a confined space where fear spreads faster than solutions. The river surrounding them offers no escape, and the jungle beyond the boat provides no safety. The balance of power has completely changed. At the beginning of the journey, the crew believed they were entering the Amazon to discover something hidden. Now they understand that something hidden has discovered them. The snake they came to fear is still out there, moving through the darkness. But so is Sarwan. And both represent the same terrifying truth. The greatest mistake the crew made was believing they could control a world that never belonged to them. After everything the crew has endured, the final confrontation in Anaconda does not take place in the untouched wilderness they expected to explore. Instead, the survivors arrive at a forgotten human structure hidden deep within the Amazon, an abandoned river facility that feels like a reflection of everything the expedition has become. The location is important because it represents the collision between civilization and the natural world. The crew entered the jungle believing that human technology and preparation would give them an advantage, but the rainforest has slowly stripped away that confidence. Now they find themselves surrounded by the remains of another attempt to impose human control on an environment that refuses to be conquered. The abandoned facility becomes the perfect stage for the final battle because it combines the two forces that have dominated the entire film: human obsession and nature's unpredictability. The broken machinery, empty spaces, and decaying structures create an atmosphere of isolation. This is no longer an expedition searching for discovery. It is a desperate struggle between survivors, a predator, and a man who refuses to accept defeat. At the center of this final conflict is Paul Sarwan. Throughout the film, Sarwan has viewed the Anaconda as his greatest achievement waiting to be captured. He believes that defeating the creature will prove his intelligence, courage, and superiority. But by the climax, that obsession has completely consumed him. The hunter has become trapped inside his own pursuit. His actions toward Terry and Danny reveal the full extent of his transformation. Instead of seeing them as people who have survived alongside him, he sees them as tools. Their fear, their vulnerability, and even their lives become part of his strategy. By using them as bait, Sarwan demonstrates that his obsession has removed any remaining sense of morality. This moment completes his journey as a villain. Earlier, Sarwan manipulated people with charm and confidence. He convinced others to follow him because he appeared capable and experienced. But in the final act, the performance disappears. What remains is someone completely consumed by his desire to capture the impossible. The irony is that Sarwan believes he is controlling the situation, but he is actually repeating the same mistake the crew made from the beginning. He underestimates the jungle. He believes that knowledge and determination are enough to overcome nature. The Anaconda proves otherwise. The creature's final confrontation with Sarwan delivers one of the film's most memorable sequences because it embraces everything Anaconda represents. It is exaggerated, violent, and larger than life. The movie does not attempt to make the moment subtle. Instead, it fully commits to the spectacle of a human being facing a creature that exists beyond ordinary reality. Sarwan's death becomes the ultimate consequence of his obsession. The man who spent the entire story hunting the snake is finally destroyed by the very thing he believed he could dominate. The abandoned facility allows the film to expand the scale of the climax through a combination of environmental danger and creature effects. Fire, water, and collapsing spaces turn the location into a constantly changing battlefield. The snake moves through the environment like a force of destruction, while Terry and Danny must use every remaining piece of their intelligence and courage to survive. The physical design of the sequence reflects the film's approach to monster filmmaking. The Anaconda is not simply a special effect appearing in the background. It is treated as an active presence that shapes the entire scene. The characters are forced to react to its movement, its size, and the fear it creates. Terry and Danny's survival also completes the emotional journey established earlier in the film. They are no longer the same people who entered the Amazon at the beginning. Their original goals have changed. The documentary, the search for discovery, and the excitement of exploration have all been replaced by something much more basic: the need to survive and protect each other. Their partnership becomes the opposite of Saron's worldview. Where Sarwan sees people as tools, Terry and Danny recognize the importance of trust and cooperation. They survive not because they overpower the jungle, but because they adapt to it. After escaping the facility and finally breaking free from the immediate threat, the two survivors continue down the river. The journey that began with uncertainty ends with an unexpected discovery. Instead of finding only danger in the Amazon, they finally encounter the Shirashama tribe they were searching for all along. The ending creates an interesting contrast with everything that came before it. The crew spent the entire film chasing a story about the unknown, but the greatest discoveries were never the ones they expected. The snake became the headline they never wanted, while the human connection they originally sought remained hidden until the very end. This final moment gives the film a strange sense of completion. The expedition was nearly destroyed by ambition, greed, and the desire to control nature, but the survivors reached their destination only after letting go of that need for control. Anaconda ends exactly as it began, with mystery. The Amazon remains vast and unexplained. The world beyond civilization still contains secrets. And somewhere within that endless landscape, the possibility of another creature, another legend, or another impossible story continues to exist. That uncertainty is what keeps the film's final image alive. The adventure may be over, but the jungle still has more stories waiting beneath the surface. At first glance, Terry Flores and Danny Rich do not look like the typical heroes of a 1990s creature feature. They are not trained soldiers, professional hunters, or action movie warriors built around physical dominance. They do not enter the Amazon carrying weapons and confidence. They enter with cameras, equipment, and a desire to tell a story. That choice is important because it changes the kind of survival story Anaconda becomes. The film does not build its protagonists around the fantasy that ordinary people can suddenly become unstoppable action heroes. Instead, Terry and Danny survive because they learn, adapt, and recognize the danger around them. Their strength comes from awareness rather than power, making them more believable representatives of the audience trapped inside the nightmare with them. Terry Flores begins the film as a filmmaker driven by curiosity and ambition. As the director of the documentary expedition, she is focused on capturing something meaningful. Her goal is not simply to complete a job, she wants to discover a story that matters. She represents the optimism of exploration, the belief that entering the unknown can lead to something valuable. But the Amazon forces her to change. The environment she enters is completely different from the controlled world of filmmaking. Behind a camera, Terry has authority. She can organize a crew, make creative decisions, and guide the direction of the documentary. In the jungle, however, those skills are tested by circumstances that cannot be managed. Her transformation comes from necessity. The longer the expedition continues, the more Terry has to abandon the role of observer and become an active participant in survival. She is no longer simply recording events. She is making decisions that determine whether people live or die. This evolution places her within the tradition of the final girl archetype often associated with horror cinema, but Anaconda gives that role a different shape. Terry is not defined by innocence or fear alone. She is defined by problem solving. She survives because she thinks under pressure, understands the people around her, and refuses to surrender control even when everything around her collapses. Jennifer Lopez's performance supports that balance. Terry is determined without becoming unrealistic. She shows fear, but fear does not control her decisions. The character works because the audience can see the emotional cost of what she experiences. Every loss changes her. Every danger forces her to become more prepared. Danny Rich provides a different kind of strength. Played by Ice Cube, Danny serves as the grounded perspective within the group. While other characters are influenced by excitement, ambition, or obsession, Danny often responds with skepticism and practicality. He questions situations that others accept too quickly, creating a sense of realism in a story built around an enormous snake. His role is especially interesting because he challenges expectations of horror and adventure characters. In many genre films, supporting characters exist only to make mistakes, create conflict, or become victims. Danny does not follow that pattern. He is observant, capable, and emotionally aware. He understands that surviving the jungle requires more than courage. It requires recognizing when something is wrong. Danny's connection to the audience comes from his refusal to be impressed by danger. He does not romanticize the expedition or Saron's obsession. Where others see adventure, he sees risk. Where others believe promises of discovery and reward, he sees manipulation. That perspective makes him one of the film's most important stabilizing forces. The relationship between Terry and Danny works because their personalities complement each other. Terry begins as the person leading the expedition, while Danny becomes the person who helps her confront the reality of their situation. Their partnership develops naturally through shared pressure rather than forced emotional storytelling. The film does not need a traditional romance to create connection between them. Their bond comes from trust. They become allies because they recognize that they are surrounded by people and forces they cannot rely on. In a movie filled with chaos and exaggerated danger, their cooperation provides emotional stability. This chemistry also helps balance the film's more ridiculous elements. Anaconda constantly moves between genuine suspense and over-the-top spectacle, and Terry and Danny give the audience something human to hold on to. Their reactions ground the impossible. When they fear the snake, the audience feels the danger. When they challenge Sarwan, the conflict feels personal. They represent the human side of a movie built around an inhuman threat. That contrast is what makes them effective protagonists. The giant anaconda may be the reason audiences remember the film, but Terry and Danny are the reason the story works. They transform a simple monster premise into a survival journey about adaptation, trust, and the ability to remain human when everything around you becomes unpredictable. In the end, their greatest victory is not defeating a creature. It is surviving a world where nature, ambition, and fear are constantly trying to take control. In a movie built around a gigantic snake, it would be easy for the creature itself to become the most memorable threat. After all, the anaconda is the central attraction, the impossible predator that drives the entire story. But decades after its release, one of the reasons Anaconda remains so recognizable is that the film's greatest danger is not always the creature moving through the jungle. It is the man chasing it. Paul Sarwan is one of those rare movie villains whose presence almost changes the genre around him. He is not simply an obstacle standing between the heroes and survival. He brings his own energy, his own mythology, and his own strange sense of purpose. In many ways, the snake is the monster of the story, but Sarwan is the person who reveals what happens when human obsession becomes just as dangerous as nature itself. The character follows a tradition of obsessive figures in literature and cinema, most notably resembling the destructive pursuit of Captain Ahab from Moby Dick. Like Ahab, Sarwan is consumed by the need to conquer something that represents a personal challenge. The object of his obsession is not merely an animal. It is a symbol of victory, recognition, and personal greatness. For Ahab, the white whale becomes the target of revenge and identity. For Sarwan, the giant anaconda becomes proof that he is the person capable of achieving what others cannot. He does not want to simply encounter the creature. He wants to own the story surrounding it. That distinction separates him from the other characters. The documentary crew enters the Amazon searching for discovery. They want to witness something unknown and share it with the world. Sarwan enters the jungle searching for dominance. He does not want to understand the natural world. He wants to defeat it. This obsession slowly removes his connection to other people. The crew members around him become useful only when they help him move closer to his goal. Their fears, their safety, and eventually their lives become secondary compared to the possibility of capturing the legendary snake. Jon Voight's performance makes this transformation fascinating because he refuses to play Sarwan as a conventional villain. Instead of creating a cold, emotionless antagonist, Voight builds someone theatrical, unpredictable, and strangely charismatic. Sarwan understands the power of performance. From the moment he appears, he controls attention. His exaggerated accent, intense expressions, and unusual mannerisms create the feeling of someone who is always acting for an audience. He does not simply speak. He performs. Every word feels designed to establish dominance and mystery. The accent became one of the most discussed aspects of the performance, but it also contributes to why Sarwan is impossible to forget. It gives him an almost unreal quality, making him feel like someone who belongs to a larger-than-life adventure story rather than an ordinary person. Voight's physical choices are equally important. Sarwan often carries himself with a strange confidence that mirrors the creature he is hunting. His movements can feel slow, deliberate, and watchful. He observes people carefully, waits for opportunities, and strikes when weakness appears. The comparison between Sarwan and the snake is intentional in the way the character is presented. Both rely on patience. Both understand the value of timing. Both create fear before they attack. The difference is that the snake acts through instinct, while Sarwan acts through choice. That makes him more unsettling. A predator following nature's rules can be understood. A human being who willingly sacrifices others for obsession represents a more complicated threat. Sarwan is frightening because he is intelligent enough to understand consequences but selfish enough to ignore them. His famous moments of confidence, his unsettling smiles, and his almost playful attitude toward danger reveals someone who enjoys being close to chaos. He is not afraid of the impossible. He is attracted to it. This is why his scenes often feel larger than the movie around him. Anaconda's creature effects create spectacle, but Sarwan creates unpredictability. The audience never knows exactly what he will do because his motivations are not based on survival alone. They are based on proving himself right. That makes him one of the most memorable human villains in creature feature history. Many monster movies depend entirely on the creature for tension. The human characters simply react to the threat. Anaconda takes a different approach by creating a villain who brings his own form of danger into the story. The snake attacks physically, but Sarwan attacks psychologically. He represents the darker side of exploration, the belief that every mystery exists to be conquered and every discovery belongs to whoever reaches it first. In the end, Paul Sarwan remains unforgettable because he is not just hunting the monster. He has become one. A creature feature is often judged by the size of its monster, but the success of the genre usually depends on something much more human, whether the audience cares about the people running from it. The giant anaconda creates the threat, but the supporting characters determine the emotional weight of that threat. Anaconda understands this classic monster movie structure. The members of the documentary crew are not given endless backstories or complicated personal histories. Instead, the film quickly establishes their personalities, motivations, and weaknesses, allowing each character to serve a specific role within the survival narrative. That approach is common in creature features because the audience needs to understand who these people are before the danger begins. The fear does not come only from watching a monster attack. It comes from watching a group of individuals lose the safety they believed they had. Dr. Stephen Cale, played by Eric Stoltz, represents the intellectual foundation of the expedition. He is the character most associated with knowledge, preparation, and rational thinking. In many ways, Cale functions as the person who should be able to explain the unknown. He represents the belief that understanding a situation can provide control over it. But Anaconda uses his character to challenge that idea. The Amazon is not a puzzle that can simply be solved through intelligence. Knowledge is valuable, but it does not guarantee survival. Cale's journey reflects one of the film's larger themes. Human expertise has limits when confronted with forces beyond ordinary experience. His importance becomes especially clear because his condition changes the balance of power within the group. When the person most capable of offering logical guidance is removed from the decision-making process, the crew becomes more vulnerable to Sarwan's influence. The loss is not only physical. It creates a psychological weakness that allows chaos to spread. Gary, played by Owen Wilson, is one of the more interesting characters because the role comes from a period before Wilson became primarily associated with comedy and charming comedic performances. In Anaconda, he plays a much more vulnerable and uncertain figure, someone caught between excitement and fear. Gary represents the part of the expedition that still believes adventure can lead to something extraordinary. He is attracted to the possibility of discovery, and that makes him especially susceptible to Sarwan's manipulation. Sarwan understands that not everyone needs to be controlled through fear. Some people can be controlled through desire. By promising wealth and recognition, Sarwan appeals to Gary's imagination. He turns the dangerous hunt for the anaconda into a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. The tragedy of Gary's character comes from the fact that his weakness is not cruelty or arrogance. It is the human desire to believe that a dangerous situation might still lead to something rewarding. That makes his fate more impactful. Jonathan Hyde's character, Warren Westridge, serves a different purpose within the group dynamic. As the documentary's narrator and a more traditional professional figure, Westridge represents a certain kind of old-fashioned authority. He carries himself with confidence and sophistication, creating a contrast between the polished world of media production and the unpredictable reality of the jungle. His personality also provides moments of dark humor. The character's sense of superiority creates an ironic contrast with the environment around him. He enters the Amazon with the attitude of someone who believes professionalism and experience place him above the chaos, but the jungle quickly challenges that assumption. This irony is one of the film's recurring ideas. Many characters arrive believing they understand the world they are entering. Each one eventually discovers that the Amazon does not care about reputation, intelligence, or status. Carrie Wooer's Denise Calder adds another layer to the group dynamic. She represents the practical side of the expedition and contributes to the sense that this is a team of professionals rather than a group of random victims. Her presence helps establish the crew as people with roles, responsibilities, and relationships before the survival elements completely take over. What makes the supporting cast effective is how efficiently the film defines them. Anaconda does not spend excessive time explaining every character, but it gives each person enough personality for the audience to understand their place within the story. The confident one. The skeptic. The dreamer. The professional. The ambitious outsider. These recognizable archetypes allow the film to create a rhythm that is essential to monster storytelling. Each character's personality influences how they respond to danger, which makes every loss feel different rather than repetitive. The body count in a creature feature only works when the audience understands what is being lost. A monster attacking anonymous figures creates simple shock. A monster attacking characters the audience has quickly come to recognize creates emotional impact. Anaconda uses its supporting cast to build that emotional structure. Their personalities create tension, their flaws create vulnerability, and their relationships create the human conflict surrounding the creature. The snake may determine who survives, but the supporting characters determine why survival matters. Their presence gives the film a sense of escalation, turning each encounter into more than another attack. Every loss becomes a reminder that the expedition is disappearing piece by piece, leaving only the people strong enough, or lucky enough, to face the final confrontation. Beneath the chaos, oversized creature effects, and survival spectacle, Anaconda is built around a much older cinematic conflict, humanity's belief that nature can be understood, controlled, and eventually conquered. The film places its characters inside one of the most powerful environments on Earth and immediately challenges their assumptions about it. The Amazon rainforest is not portrayed as a simple location for adventure. It is a living, unpredictable space that exists beyond human expectations. It can be beautiful, mysterious, and fascinating, but it can also be completely indifferent to the people who enter it. That idea creates the foundation of the film's central theme. The documentary crew arrives with a romantic view of exploration. They believe the jungle contains stories waiting to be discovered and cultures waiting to be understood. Their mission is built around curiosity and preservation. Through their cameras, they hope to capture something meaningful and share a world most people will never experience. But the Amazon does not exist for their documentary. It does not adjust itself for their goals, and it does not reward their intentions. The crew's biggest mistake is not entering the jungle. It is believing that good intentions alone are enough to protect them. Anaconda presents nature as something that does not operate according to human morality. The rainforest is not evil, and the snake is not acting out of revenge or hatred. The creature is dangerous because it is following its own instincts. It hunts because it is a predator. It survives because that is what it was designed to do. This makes the human character's behavior even more revealing. While the snake represents natural instinct, Paul Sarwan represents human desire without limits. He does not simply want to observe the creature. He wants to capture it, defeat it, and turn it into a symbol of his own greatness. His obsession transforms the natural world into a trophy. Sarwan's greatest mistake is believing that understanding a predator gives him power over it. The film repeatedly shows the danger of this mindset. The more Sarwan tries to dominate the jungle, the more he becomes vulnerable to it. His confidence prevents him from recognizing the difference between knowledge and control. He may understand the environment, but he does not respect it. That lack of respect becomes his downfall. Through Sarwan, Anaconda explores greed as a destructive force. His obsession with capturing the snake is not driven by survival. It is driven by ego. He wants the recognition that comes from achieving something impossible. The creature becomes less important than what defeating it would mean for him. Gary experiences a smaller version of the same temptation. Unlike Sarwan, he is not motivated by obsession alone, but he is still drawn toward the promise of reward. The possibility of wealth and discovery makes him willing to ignore warning signs. Together, Sarwan and Gary represent different forms of exploitation. One seeks personal glory, while the other seeks personal gain. Both fail because they view the anaconda as something that exists for human benefit. The characters who survive are not the strongest or the most aggressive. They are the ones who learn to adapt. Terry and Danny survive because they stop trying to control the environment and start responding to it. They recognize that the jungle cannot be defeated through confidence or ambition. It must be navigated through awareness, cooperation, and humility. This creates one of the film's most important contrasts. Sarwan believes survival comes from domination. Terry and Danny learn that survival comes from adaptation. That difference reflects a broader idea found throughout survival stories. Humans are not powerful because they can overpower nature. They are powerful because they can learn from it. The anaconda itself becomes a symbol of that lesson. It represents everything humanity cannot completely predict or control. It is a reminder that some forces exist outside human ambition, technology, and pride. For a movie built around such an exaggerated monster, Anaconda's themes are surprisingly grounded. The giant snake may be fictional, but the conflict behind it is real. The desire to exploit the unknown, the belief that humans can control every environment, and the consequences of ignoring nature's limits are ideas that extend far beyond the jungle. The film's ultimate message is not that nature must be feared. It is that nature must be respected. Because the moment humans stop seeing the natural world as something to understand and start seeing it as something to conquer, survival becomes much harder. Although Anaconda is remembered primarily as a creature feature built around spectacle, the film's visual language reveals a deeper structure beneath the surface. The jungle, the river, and even the way the snake is presented are not simply elements of the adventure. They become symbols that reflect the character's psychological journey and the gradual collapse of their sense of control. The most important visual element throughout the film is the Amazon River itself. From the beginning, the river represents movement, but not necessarily progress. The crew believes they are traveling toward discovery, toward the Shirashama tribe, and toward the completion of their documentary. However, the farther they move along the river, the more they leave behind the safety and certainty of the world they know. The river becomes a visual metaphor for a journey into the unknown. There is a mythological quality to the way the film presents the Amazon waterways. Like the river Styx from ancient mythology, it feels like a passage that carries people away from one world and into another. Once the crew begins moving deeper into the jungle, returning becomes increasingly difficult. Every turn takes them farther from civilization and closer to danger. The river does not simply transport them physically. It transforms them. At the beginning of the journey, the Miri represents exploration and possibility. It carries equipment, ambition, and the promise of discovery. But as Sarwan takes control and the threats increase, the same boat becomes a prison. The river that once offered freedom becomes a path they cannot escape. This transformation reflects the larger emotional movement of the story. The crew enters the Amazon as observers, but they eventually become participants in a struggle they never expected to experience. The film also uses reflections and mirrored images to explore the dual nature of Paul Sarwan. Throughout the story, Sarwan exists between two identities. He presents himself as a guide and protector, but beneath that surface is someone driven by obsession and selfish ambition. Water and reflective surfaces reinforce this contradiction. Reflections create images that are incomplete and distorted, suggesting that what characters see is not always the full truth. This is especially fitting for Sarwan because his entire personality is built around deception. He appears helpful while secretly pursuing his own goal. He acts like a survivor while placing others in danger. The visual connection between Sarwan and the snake also strengthens this idea. Both characters are associated with patience, observation, and sudden violence. Sarwan watches people carefully, studies their weaknesses, and waits for opportunities to gain control. Like the predator he hunts, he relies on timing and psychological pressure. The film's presentation of the anaconda itself further develops this symbolic relationship. One of the most memorable visual choices is the use of predator perspective shots that place the audience into the snake's viewpoint. These moments change the way viewers experience the creature. Instead of simply watching the snake attack, the audience temporarily sees the world through the eyes of the hunter. The thermal vision perspective is especially effective because it creates a clear visual contrast between predator and prey. The snake does not see the jungle the way humans do. It does not recognize faces, careers, or personal histories. It sees movement, heat, and opportunity. The humans are reduced to biological signals. This perspective removes the illusion of human superiority. The documentary crew arrives believing they are the ones studying the environment, but these shots reveal that they are also being studied. They become objects within another creature's world. The cold-blooded predator versus the warm-blooded prey creates a visual representation of the film's larger conflict. The humans rely on technology, planning, and intelligence. The snake relies on instinct. Both are forms of survival, but they operate according to completely different rules. The jungle itself also creates a sense of claustrophobia despite being an enormous open environment. This is one of Anaconda's most interesting visual contradictions. The rainforest appears endless, but the characters often feel trapped. The dense vegetation blocks visibility. The narrow river channels restrict movement. The surrounding environment creates the feeling that danger can emerge from anywhere. The crew has space around them, but they do not have freedom. The Amazon becomes a giant maze. Every visual choice reinforces the same idea: the characters have entered a world where familiar rules no longer apply. The river carries them deeper, reflections hide the truth, and the predator's vision reveals their vulnerability. Anaconda may be built around a massive snake, but its imagery is ultimately about perspective. The film asks viewers to consider what happens when humans stop being the ones looking into the unknown and realize that the unknown has been watching them all along. Beneath its surface as a jungle adventure about survival and a gigantic predator, Anaconda contains ideas that connect to larger conversations about exploration, exploitation, and the complicated relationship between outsiders and unfamiliar worlds. The film begins with a familiar adventure premise: a group of Western filmmakers traveling into an unknown region in search of a story. On the surface, their mission appears noble. They want to document the Shama tribe, preserve their culture, and share their existence with audiences who may never encounter them. But the film gradually complicates that idea. The documentary crew enters the Amazon believing that their presence is harmless because their intentions are based on curiosity rather than conquest. However, the story suggests that even well-meaning outsiders can create disruption when they enter environments they do not fully understand. The desire to document a world can become another form of intrusion when the people behind the camera begin treating that world as something that exists for their own purpose.